It was 2:47 on a Tuesday. I was at my desk, mid-call, the kind of call you cannot hang up without consequences. My colleague was talking. My pen was moving. Everything was normal. And then my phone lit up with Andy's name, and something in my chest went very still before I even touched the screen. I signaled, 1 second, and I read it. Then I read it again. 7 words, no punctuation, no explanation, no apology. Just a command delivered to me like I was someone who needed to be managed. I was today years old when I learned that 7 words could make the whole room go quiet around you. Not the room I was in, the room inside my head, the one that is always running calculations, always assessing, always 3 steps ahead, that room, silent for the first time in years. My colleague's face appeared over her monitor. She mouthed, "You okay?" I nodded. I was not okay. But here is what I did not do. I did not text back. I did not call. I did not sit at that desk and absorb it the way I had been absorbing things for 6 years. I reached into my bag, and my fingers found the small, folded piece of paper my daughter had tucked in there that morning before school, pressing it into my hand like a secret she needed me to carry. I didn't take it out. I just held it for one breath. Then I picked up my keys, and I drove home. Before I tell you what happened when I walked through that door, you need to know who I am. Not what I do, not my title, who I am. I work in corporate risk assessment. My entire job is identifying what is structurally unstable before it collapses. I find the cracks. I read the patterns. I see the thing that is about to break long before anyone else in the room is willing to call it. I am very good at my job. I was not, for a long time, brave enough to apply it to my own life. I chose Andy because he showed up. That sounds simple. It was everything. My daughter was 4 years old and her father had not been showing up for 2 years, and Andy came to her school play, sat in a small plastic chair built for a 6-year-old, and clapped so loud she looked out into the audience and laughed. That laugh, I decided in that moment that this man was someone worth choosing. He came with a history. His son, 3 years old when we met, from his relationship with Sheila. I accepted it completely. I thought we were building something that held everyone, something wide enough and strong enough for 2 children, 2 histories, 1 future. And then, one ordinary afternoon, maybe 8 months in, my daughter looked up from her drawing at the kitchen table, looked at Andy pouring juice across the room, and said it, just like that. Dad. No announcement, no ceremony. She just decided, the way children decide things, completely and without conditions, before the world teaches them to protect themselves. I didn't even know she was going to do it. I cried that night after she was asleep, stood in the kitchen with my hand over my mouth so she wouldn't hear me, crying because I thought it meant we had made it, because I thought the hardest part was behind us, because I believed that word meant we were safe. I was still holding that word, Dad, somewhere deep in my chest when I read Andy's text on Tuesday afternoon. I need you to hold it too. Hold it the way I held it driving home that day, because everything that matters about what happened next lives inside it. His son was 3 when we met. He is 9 now. My daughter was 4. She is 10 now. They grew up alongside each other. Dinners, birthdays, holidays, school plays, all of it. But they were never treated the same, not by Linda. And that difference, quiet, deliberate, consistent, year after year, is not the background of this story. It is the story. The early years were good. I want to be honest about that, because this story is not about a marriage that was never real. It was real. Andy was present, warm, the kind of man who remembered small things, how I took my coffee, which side of the bed I needed, that my daughter was afraid of thunder and needed someone to sit with her until it passed. He sat with her, every time, without being asked. So I stayed. I built. I gave it everything I had. But things shift in marriages the way foundations shift in old buildings, slowly, invisibly, until one day you notice the crack in the wall and realize it has been there for a very long time. The late nights started small, one here, two there, then they were just normal. His answers got shorter, not cold, just shorter, and Linda's presence got louder. More dinners, more weekends, more of Andy's attention flowing in one direction like water finding its level. I told myself this was family. I told myself I was lucky to have it. The first time Sheila's name came up, I almost missed it. Andy was telling a story at dinner, something funny, something from before, the kind of story that belongs to a life you lived without the person sitting across from you. Long story short, her name landed in the middle of it like it belonged there. Casual, easy, like a word he had said 1,000 times. I watched Linda's face. Something moved across it, something warm and immediate and completely unguarded, there and gone in less than 2 seconds. She caught herself, reached for her glass, changed the subject. I filed it, said nothing, told myself I was reading too much into a dinner table expression. But nothing prepared me for the birthday party. Andy's nephew turned 7. The whole family gathered, the kind of loud, joyful chaos that had once made me feel like I belonged to something. Cake was brought out, and one by one, the children were called to the table by name. Andy's son, called. Every cousin, called. Every niece and nephew in that room, called by name, waved forward, made to feel seen. My daughter stood 3 feet from the table, holding her paper plate, waiting. Her name never came. She walked to the table anyway, because she was 7 and she wanted cake, and she was still young enough to believe that the silence was a mistake and not a message. Nobody shifted to make space for her. Nobody called her over. Nobody corrected it. Andy saw it happen. I watched him see it. His jaw tightened for exactly 1 second, and then he looked away, reached for his drink, said nothing. I said nothing either. I smiled. I kept the peace. I was so good at keeping the peace. In the car on the way home, she was quiet for a long time, the kind of quiet that sits in a child's body when they are working something out that their words are not yet big enough for. Then, small voice, window-facing, like she was asking the glass instead of me. Why didn't she call my name? I kept my eyes on the road, kept my voice steady. She probably just forgot, baby. A pause. 3 seconds, 4. She didn't forget the other ones. 7 years old. I drove the rest of the way home in silence with my daughter's words sitting in my chest like something I would never be able to put down. I am 12 minutes from home when my professional brain finally does what it has been trained to do. It stops feeling. It starts working. In risk assessment, we call it pattern recognition, the moment scattered data stops looking like coincidence and starts looking like a system. The moment you stop explaining individual incidents and start seeing the architecture underneath them. I turned that skill off for 6 years when it came to my own life. Sitting in traffic, 12 minutes from home, I turn it back on. The photo on Linda's mantle. Every family member framed. Andy's son in a silver frame Linda chose carefully. My daughter in one group shot, far left, slightly cut off at the edge, like the photographer almost didn't get her in frame. My daughter pointed at it once and asked why she wasn't in a bigger picture. I told her the frames were old. I have never fully forgiven myself for that answer. Then the phone. 14 months ago, S on the screen, while Andy stood in the shower and his phone lit up on the counter like it had something to say. 1 letter, no name, no context. I told myself it was work, a vendor, a colleague whose name happened to start with a letter that made my stomach drop. I put the groceries away. I didn't ask. I filed it in the same place I filed everything. Deep and quiet and sealed shut in a part of me I hoped I would never have to open. I am a risk assessor. I know what it means when someone starts using initials instead of names. I filed it anyway. And then the voicemail. 2 years ago, Linda called Andy and got something wrong, left a message that was not meant for my ears. I listened to it standing in our kitchen with a laundry basket in my hands and the whole world rearranging itself around me in real time. Her voice was calm, certain, the voice of a woman saying something she had said many times before inside her own head. She's never going to be what Sheila was to this family. You can love her, I'm not asking you not to, but don't forget where you come from. Don't forget what we built. I stood there for a long time. Then I saved it. I never confronted her. I never told Andy I had it. I filed it in the deepest place I had, and I went back to keeping the peace. This text on Tuesday was not the first time Andy had managed me around his mother's comfort. It was the third. Text 1, a holiday morning 2 years ago. Linda wasn't feeling well. Better to keep it small. Could I sit this one out? I had already cooked. I put the food in containers, spent the holiday on the couch with my daughter watching movies, making it sound like a choice, making it sound like joy. Text 2, a family friend's funeral. 20 minutes before I was due to leave. Maybe sip this one out. Mom's already stressed. I sat it out. Text 3, Tuesday, 2:47 p.m. The third time. The last time. I pull into the driveway. The lights are on inside. I can see 2 figures moving through the kitchen window. Easy, unhurried, completely at home. I sit in the car for exactly 90 seconds. I watch. Linda and Sheila in my kitchen, moving with the comfortable ease of 2 women who have done this many times before, in this kitchen or one very much like it. And Linda laughing, loose, unguarded, fully present, in a way I had spent 6 years trying to earn and never once heard directed at me. I open the voicemail one final time. I press play. Her voice fills the car. Don't forget where you come from. Don't forget what we built. And I listen to it all the way to the end. Then I get out of the car.
I want you to understand something about the 90 seconds I spent in that car. I was not hesitating. I was not losing my nerve. I was doing what I do before every high-stakes situation, collecting myself completely, making sure that when I walked through that door, I walked through it as the most composed, most precise, most deliberate version of myself that has ever existed. I use my key. Andy hears the lock turn first. His face changes before he speaks. The color leaves it in 1 second, just like that. Before I even step inside, he already knows that tonight is different, that this time is not like the other times. Good. I step inside. My eyes move past Andy immediately, to the fridge, to the drawing held by a magnet in the center of it. 2 figures, crayon, one tall in a purple dress, one small with her hair in 2 puffs. Underneath, in the careful, deliberate print of a 10-year-old who has been practicing her letters, our family. Sheila is standing 3 feet from it. Benita, I told you not to come home. I look at Andy, then at the drawing, then back at Andy, and I make sure he can see in my face everything I am about to say before I say a single word of it. I know, I say, this is my home. I put my bag down on the chair by the door, the same chair it always goes on. That small, deliberate act, putting my bag on my chair in my home, was the first thing I did. Not because it mattered practically, because I needed every person in that room to watch me move through my own space like I belonged in it. Because I did. Sheila was on the couch, not hovering at the edge of someone else's space the way a person sits when they know they shouldn't be there. Settled, her shoes off, a glass on my coffee table. Comfortable in the particular way that told me this was not her first time feeling comfortable in a space that belonged to me.
Linda had positioned herself near the counter, composed, watchful, wearing the expression of a woman who had anticipated this moment and had already decided how she was going to handle it. Andy stood between all of them like a man who had built 2 separate rooms and was only now understanding they shared a wall. I looked at each of them. Then I looked at Sheila.
and Sheila's eyes moved to the drawing on the fridge. Not with surprise, with recognition. The quiet, careful recognition of someone who had already cataloged that drawing when she arrived, who had read those 2 words in my daughter's handwriting and made her calculation, and decided the calculation came out in her favor. She knew whose house this was. She knew whose family was drawn on crayon on that door. She had seen it. She had stayed anyway. Every single thing I had filed away for 6 years unlocked at once. The silver frame, the birthday party, the holiday on the couch, the voicemail, the 3 texts, the S on his phone. Not a vendor, never a vendor. I asked 3 questions, calm, sequential, already knowing the answers, needing them spoken out loud so they existed in the room and could not be taken back. How long has Sheila been here? Did you tell her she could come? Did you tell me? Andy answered all 3. Then he gave me what he believed was his justification, his voice careful, genuinely remorseful in the way of someone who is sorry for the inconvenience, but not for the decision. He reached out in a crisis. She had nowhere to go. My mother called me before I could figure out how to tell you. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I was trying to be human. I waited. I have learned that if you wait long enough after a man finishes explaining himself, he will say the true thing, the thing underneath the explanation, the thing he has been thinking all along that the explanation was built to protect. Andy looked at me with something close to tenderness, and he said it. You were always the right choice. The room was completely silent. I turned those 6 words over the way I turn over financial documents, looking for what they revealed rather than what they intended. And what they revealed was this. There had been a choice, an ongoing, never quite finished choice, and I was the outcome, not the reason, the right choice, the responsible one, the sensible decision, while Sheila stayed available behind a single letter on a phone screen just in case the responsible decision ever stopped feeling like enough. I had spent 6 years trying to be enough for a man who had already decided we were sufficient. Nobody expected me to sit down. That was the first thing that shocked them, the complete, unhurried stillness of a woman who had nothing left to manage and nowhere else she needed to be. I sat. I placed my hands in my lap. Then I said nothing. 3 seconds. Long enough for Andy to open his mouth and close it again. Long enough for Linda's composure to develop the first hairline crack I had ever seen in it. Long enough for every assumption they had about how Benita handles things, quietly, patiently, without making anyone uncomfortable, to become uncertainty. Then I spoke. And I spoke to Linda first, because Linda was always the real conversation. I watched you through the window before I came inside. You were laughing, loose and easy and completely present in a way I have spent 6 years in your life and have never once heard directed at me. I don't say that with bitterness. I say it because I need you to understand. I knew everything I needed to know before I walked through that door. That laugh told me more than anything said in this room tonight. I spent years trying to earn my place here. I showed up to every dinner. I smiled at every gathering where you introduced me as Andy's wife as though my name was too much effort. You decided before I walked through your door the first time because I wouldn't defer to you, because I wasn't afraid of you, and a woman who isn't afraid of you is a woman you cannot manage. I could have handled you not choosing me. What I cannot handle, what I will never forgive, is what you did to my daughter. That little girl came into this family with her whole heart open. She called your son Dad without being asked because she trusted completely and without conditions. You put his son in a silver frame on your mantle. You put my daughter at the edge of a group photo cut off to the side. She was 7 years old when she noticed. She asked me why she wasn't in a bigger picture, and I lied to her face to protect her from what you were already teaching her about her own worth. That is what I will never forgive. A 7-year-old child who did nothing except trust a family that had already decided she was less than. She deserved better. And so, it turns out, did I. I turned to Andy. Quieter now. Sadder.
the hardest words in the room. You said I was always the right choice. I know you meant it kindly. Here is what it told me. You had a choice. You were still making it long after the decision should have been finished. You used your mother's preferences and Sheila's crises and every available reason so you would never have to admit that to yourself or to me. I needed a husband who chose me once and then stopped choosing, who closed the door and stayed on this side of it. You were still someone's son, first, always, and I was, at best, the right choice, while something else stayed available behind a single letter on your phone screen. I don't think you are a bad man. I think you never grew all the way up. And I think you were counting on my patience to last forever. It lasted 6 years. That was already longer than it should have. My daughter called you Dad because she decided to trust you, completely, without conditions, the way children do before they learn that trust can be given to the wrong person. She doesn't give that away twice. I hope you understand what you had before it's too late to matter. I stood up. I walked to my bag. I removed 2 things and placed them on the counter, one beside the other, with the careful deliberateness of someone filing the final documents in a case that is now closed. My house key. And 1 printed page. Linda's voicemail. Her words in black ink on white paper, left by accident 2 years ago. Saved in silence. Set down now like the final piece of evidence in a case I had been building without knowing I was building it. I placed the transcript face up. I looked at Linda as I set it down. I watched her read the first line. I watched the color leave her face. I did not explain it. I did not need to. Then, Sheila. 1 sentence. You already know everything I would have said. You knew it when you looked at that drawing and decided to stay anyway. Some people don't need words. They need you to simply stop making space for them. I've stopped. I picked up my bag. I walked to the door. I turned once. You had a woman who showed up completely. You had a little girl who called this man Dad because she decided to trust him, and children don't give that away twice. I hope this was worth what it cost. I walked out. The door closed behind me, quietly, the way I do everything, without giving anyone in that room the satisfaction of a sound they could interpret as falling apart. I sat in my car. And for exactly 12 minutes, I let myself feel every single thing I had been too precise and too composed to feel inside that house. 12 minutes. Not one more. Then I started the engine because my daughter was waiting.
Andy called 17 times that night, then texted, then stopped. I let the silence be the answer. I learned through a mutual friend that Linda had been maintaining Sheila's connection for months, inviting her when I had work conflicts, keeping doors open that were never accidentally left ajar. It had not been casual. It had been a campaign, quiet, patient, methodical, conducted by a woman who had decided years ago that her son's first choice was the right one, and had simply been waiting for the current arrangement to collapse. The information landed not as a wound, but as the final data point in an assessment I had been running for 2 years without admitting it. I had the skills to see it. I chose not to use them. I will not make that mistake again. New apartment. Lease signed within the week. Legal separation filed. Research I had quietly begun the same night I first saved that voicemail to a folder I labeled with the date and nothing else. The key and the transcript on that counter were the last things I gave Andy that cost me anything. I drove to my sister's house. My daughter, 10 years old,
exhausted from a long day she knew nothing about, was half asleep on the couch in her pajamas with the small yellow stars. She woke when she heard my voice, stood up slowly, walked to me with her eyes still half closed and one hand reaching for mine. We walked to the car together. I buckled her in. She leaned back against the seat, and I watched her fight the sleep for exactly 3 seconds, the way she always does, the way she has always done, like she needs to make sure I am still there before she lets herself rest. I started the engine. Her voice came from the back seat, soft, sleepy, carrying the particular trust of a child who has never once had a reason to doubt the person driving. "Are we going home?" I looked at her in the rearview mirror. Her eyes were almost closed. Her hair was loose around her face. She was 10 years old, and she was the clearest, truest thing in my entire life. "We are going to our home," I said. "Just not that one." 3 seconds of silence. Then she leaned against the window, and she closed her eyes, and she slept. Completely, peacefully, because she trusted me. She always has. She always will.
The new apartment was smaller. The light came in differently, through a window that faced east instead of west, morning light instead of evening, which felt like exactly the right kind of beginning. Her daughter woke before me on the first morning. I heard her in the living room, the quiet, deliberate sounds of a 10-year-old engaged in something that mattered. I stood in the doorway and watched her arrange the photos, every frame, every picture, moving them with the focused seriousness she brings to everything she decides is important. She put her own photo in the center, right in the middle of the wall, eye level, the biggest frame we owned. She stepped back, tilted her head, looked at it. "That's better," she said. She walked back to her room, humming something I didn't recognize. She didn't know what she was healing. I stood in the doorway in the east-facing morning light, and I knew it for both of us. I unpacked my bag slowly. At the very bottom, the drawing, still folded exactly as she had folded it yesterday morning, sitting cross-legged on her bed, pressing each crease carefully, tucking it into my bag with both hands, like she was giving me something important to carry. She had no idea how important. I unfolded it. 2 figures, crayon, purple dress on the tall one, hair and 2 puffs on the small one. No house, no other figures, no complicated geometry, just us, exactly as she had always seen it, on a morning before any of it happened, when she was simply drawing what was true, me and Mommy. She had drawn the family that was real before I was brave enough to name it. I put it on the wall, right next to her photo, center, eye level, first thing in our new apartment. The drawing and the girl who drew it, side by side, on a wall that belonged to us completely. I stood back and looked at it for a long time. People ask me what I did that shocked everyone. The honest answer is nothing dramatic. I didn't scream, I didn't perform. I cried for exactly 12 minutes in the car, and then I stopped and I drove to get my daughter. What shocked them was simpler. I showed up. When they told me to stay away from my own home, I showed up. When they expected me to absorb it one more time, I named every single thing out loud, for my daughter and for myself. He said I was always the right choice. It took me the whole drive home to understand why that was the saddest thing anyone had ever said to me. I didn't want to be the right choice. I wanted to be the only one. My daughter already knew that. She drew it in crayon and tucked it in my bag before any of this happened. Just the 2 of us. No explanation, no conditions, no other figures. That is what love actually looks like. I work in risk assessment. My entire job is identifying structural failure before it happens. I turned that skill off for 6 years when it came to my own life. I told myself patience was strength. I told myself silence was grace. I know the difference now. The structure I am building this time, with my daughter, in our home, on our terms,
It has been assessed. It has been tested. It is going to hold.